All right, Entree Architect community, it's 4 p.m. Eastern, which means it's time for the Entree Architect Context and Clarity live conversation for Thursday, December 9th, 2021. Thanks for joining us. As you get here, say hi. Let us know that you're here and let us know where you're joining the conversation from. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff. I come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for one reason: to find clarity around the things that matter most to you, the architect. It doesn't matter if you're the employee of a firm or you own your own firm. Maybe you've circled a date on the calendar and said 2021 or maybe even 2022 at this point is my year, and you're starting to get on the runway to starting your own thing. Or maybe you have owned your own firm for a year or 10 years or 27 years, and you're starting to rethink or maybe even reimagine what that firm could or maybe even should be. All of the topics that we cover, one topic every day, they all fall under the broad umbrella of the business of architecture, and they're all the need to know topics for the success of small firm architects just like you. So thanks for joining us today. Say hi when you get here. Let's see where everybody is today. Catherine, welcome back. Glad to have you with us
Hello.
today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. I'm pretty excited because 2022 is going to be my year. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And especially after just reading this book. And I'm not just saying that because he happens to be sitting backstage, but I feel like I'm feeling kind of motivated to make it my year and figure out, what it should be. So
I love that. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I think um, I really do think, and I say this about a handful of books, but I really do think this one of these books that we're going to talk about, or a handful of these books that we're going to talk about, really are need to read books for architects when it comes to the business of architecture. So we're not going to give
mhm,
away too much yet, but we do
no.
have a guest in the green room. He's back there eating the green M&Ms, getting ready for our conversation. But let's see who's here. I see John Jones joining us from Connecticut. It looks to me like he's the first on my screen, which means he wins the crocheted bathtub. Ed Shannon, welcome back from Des Moines, Iowa, and Christian from Ithaca, New York. Let's see, Barry's joining us from Scotland and LinkedIn today. Glad to have you with us tonight, Barry. Tonight, your time. And Brian McCartney, hello from beautiful, chilly Vermilion, Ohio. I identify with that. Welcome to the Midwest, folks. Winter is apparently here. Scott Thrift, welcome back from sunny San Francisco. Glad you're here with us as well. And anybody else that's out there, the number up in the upper left-hand corner is growing. So as you get here, say hi. Even if you're just planning to listen in or multitask during this conversation, that's okay. We still want to know that you're here and want to know that you're part of this conversation. So let us know when you get here. It looks like everybody on the Facebook side is showing up as themselves right now. If you happen to come in and you notice on the screen that you show up as Facebook user without your picture, that's because you're in a private Facebook group and you have to give Facebook permission to, or Restream, I guess, the platform that we're on right now, permission to share your Facebook information. So if you would like to do that, if you happen to show up as Facebook user for your name and a blank picture, basically, go to the URL that's at the bottom left of your screen right now, chat.restream.io/FB as in Facebook. And quick couple of clicks and you can give Facebook permission to publish your name and likeness there. And you show up just like John is and Ed is and Christian is. We usually don't have those issues from the others like LinkedIn and Twitch and Twitter and YouTube. But from wherever you are, thanks for joining us. Say hi. Isra's joining us from YouTube and Boston, by the way. And Kurt's joining us from Flint, Michigan, over on the Twitch side. Scott's also on Twitch. So we've got everybody but Twitter in the house right now. Great to yeah, John says spanning the world. Absolutely. We've already spanned all the way across the US and jumped across the Atlantic to Scotland. So let's see if we can find our UK, or not our UK, but our Australian, New Zealand, or African friends, see if they join us
Or a
here
Russian
today.
friend, she could come
Or
too.
yes, our Russian friend. Is Olga out there? Olga, are you joining us from Moscow today? It's always fun to see where everybody is. All right. Well, we've got a lot of talking to do here. We've got a lot of ground to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest today. This is, there are a handful of guests that I really, really, they're kind of bucket list guests, and today's is one of them. Our guest today is an author or co author of 24 of the most read and most recognized business books on the planet, many of those residing on bestseller lists for weeks, months, if not years. Wrap your head around that for a second. He's a consultant and a thought leader. Inc. magazine has called him the world's #1 small business guru. You've heard of and hopefully read some of his most popular titles, like The E-Myth Revisited and The E-Myth Architect. And most recently, he's published Making It on Your Own in America, or wherever you happen to live, A Journey Toward Radical Self-Employment. Michael E. Gerber, welcome to Context and Clarity Live.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
I'm glad to have you here. And I didn't mention this before we went live, but I'm looking at the wall behind you. And even though you're in California, that just says Indiana to me. The red house or the red barn in the background, that looks like Indiana. So I feel like we're at home.
I wanted to make you feel at home.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, we
I
painted that
appreciate
just for you.
I thought you did. Well, I think, again, you got a lot of books out there, a lot of time on bestseller lists. The E-Myth, the original, the E-Myth was published in 1986. And you've obviously lots of follow-ups to that book. To ask, in your experience and in your mind and your observation, what has changed in the world of small businesses in the last 35 years since you published the E-Myth?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Absolutely nothing. The condition prevails that small businesses are started today for exactly the same reason they were started 100 years ago, and with exactly the same result. The SBA says that 70% of all new businesses fail in their first year. And then 95% fail by the time they would have reached their 10th anniversary. So effectively, the story of small businesses fail. And if not outright failure, simply an abysmal and distinctive condition that prevails in every single one of them, where it's simply struggling to stay alive.
Yeah.
The owner becomes the chief coke and bottle washer. And of course, that is most strictly true in independent architects. The architect starts the firm to practice architecture, not to create a company, to do architecture.
Yep, that really resonates with me, and I think our audience too. It's as I think, I know that in our audience right now, and I extend that to many of you know that we have these conversations every weekday afternoon. So our audience spreads around the world, and I know in that audience that we have 6, 8, or more that have started their own firms since the pandemic shut everything down in March of 2020. And that really does resonate, I think, with a lot of people. It's, hey, I'm, for whatever reason, I don't like my boss, I don't like the work, I don't like the clients, whatever the situation is, I can do this, right? And they,
Of course,
like you said, they go out and they practice architecture, maybe instead of building a business. With the current condition, or maybe everything that's gone on in the last 20 months, let's say, going back to when things, at least on the American timeline, when things shut down about mid-March of 2020, we hear a lot about the gig economy. We hear a lot about the great resignation. Have you seen anything? I don't know how much attention you've been paying to those specific, super current type things, but have you seen any result of those things on maybe the rate at which businesses are starting, or the necessity of the application of what we're talking about today?
well, let me say, and it sounds in a way unintelligent when I say that nothing's changed since 1977 when I started this. Understand, I started my first, in quotes, E-Myth company in 1977 as the Michael Thomas Corporation.
Mm.
And it was what we called a business development firm. And it was the very first small business coaching company on the planet. So we created small business coaching. When we started it in 1977, the condition was identical to the condition today. So if I were to look at the condition of small businesses right now, today, at this very moment, I would see it to be absolutely undifferent from how I saw it way back then in 1977. The same conditions, the same circumstances, the same reactions, the same responses, despite all of the coaching that's going on in the world, despite all of the, what you might say, intelligent services that are being provided today in the world, nobody's gotten any smarter. The failure rate is constant. The condition remains static. And in reality, nothing's changed other than with the companies who perhaps we have spent our time with, where something remarkably different has occurred.
You talk about,
and I would say, I would wish I could say something different. In short, that the
fair
impact
enough.
we've had has been universal. Unfortunately, it has not been universal.
Yeah. You reference Ray Kroc and McDonald's. That's sort of a common thread through at least the books that I've read. And I think that's a great example. How do you build the most successful small business on the planet? One of the things I think is a disconnect maybe in this audience, right? Small firm architects, is there a lot of people going, okay, McDonald's, but I'm doing architecture. What's the difference between starting something like McDonald's and starting an architecture firm?
There's no difference.
Okay.
There's absolutely no difference other than in the point of view of the person who's doing it. So you have to understand that if I were to speak to an architect, I would have to engage the architect in a conversation to awaken an entrepreneur within them. Because architects are not, in the main, entrepreneurs. Architects, in the main, are professional technicians doing it, busy. My job is to engage them in a conversation to suggest there's a better job available to them. And that better job is the job of a creator. And that is the job of a creator of a transformational architectural practice that could be replicated successfully worldwide to achieve identically the same measure of result that Ray Kroc achieved in the founding of McDonald's. But in order to do that, the architect would have to become an entrepreneur.
So when the architect becomes an entrepreneur, right? They let's say they transcend the state of being, the professional technician. What's the sign that they have transcended up to the entrepreneur mindset?
Oh, their whole conversation changes. So you understand their whole conversation, their whole demeanor changes. Their whole relationship with their work changes. They're suddenly, what I think about as an entrepreneur, 4 different personalities that related to growth in a way that architects aren't. And so they would be, in my context, a dreamer, a thinker, a storyteller, a leader. An entrepreneur is 4 distinct personalities. A dreamer has a dream, a thinker has a vision, a storyteller has a purpose, and a leader has a mission. So the dreamer says, I have a dream. That's the beginning of the process, the entrepreneurial process. The thinker has a vision. That is the vision, visually, emotionally, functionally, financially, of the entity, the company that's going to realize that dream. The storyteller has a audience for whom that dream is to become a reality, and the leader has a mission, which is the creation of the business development system through which all of this will be realized.
You know, I didn't think about this until you were explaining that, but I'm guessing I'm not the only one that finds it ironic. You know, when you're talking about the vision and the story and these four personalities, that for everything that architects do, the vision that they bring, the dreams that they bring to their actual work, what do you think the disconnect is? You know, you've got a group of professionals that are professional dreamers and thinkers and storytellers and so on when it applies to their projects, their client work, if I could say it that way. But yet they may not be, and most, as you're talking about, most are not applying that to the business of architecture. What do you think the disconnect is there? Where are we going wrong here?
The distant disconnect is simply the schooling an architect has had, the interest the architect has developed over the time that they've gone to school, gone to learn the profession, gone to immerse themselves in the work. And in the process, that dreaming is different than the dreaming I'm describing. It's dreaming about how to create the ideal building, how to create the ideal structure, how to create the ideal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking about the business of that. And so understand the departure from architecture means the business of architecture and how to design the business of architecture in such a way that it is transformed from doing it into something that can be scaled exponentially. So one would not replicate the traditional architectural firm from an entrepreneurial perspective. One would go far beyond it.
Yeah. You know, when as you're saying that, it reminds me that I can't believe I didn't have this in the introduction, but for all of you out there that have heard me say or anybody say, you use the phrase working on your business instead of in your business. This is the guy, right? This is the guy that basically coined that phrase. And when you were just talking about that, it's you know, working on designing the business rather than designing the home or the museum or whatever the project at hand is.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So how? Okay, so we've got architects that need to be designing their business, thinking about working on their business.
Think about this, that, for example, one as an entrepreneur, one would think about popularizing architecture and making it available to the least among us. So popularizing architecture and making it available to the least among us. And in order to do that, one would think systemically about how to popularize architecture and to make it available to the least among us so that it would become an intelligent system as opposed to a professional architect. A professional system would be absolutely constructible were one to think, now, how could I do that without me having to be there? How could we, in short, automate this process in an intelligent manner that wouldn't reduce architecture to banality, but in fact expand its capability, but at significantly less cost than a professional would insist upon. And suddenly you realize that it releases it from the architect and produces an architectural methodology.
Methodology for practice.
An artificial intelligent methodology that could do what, in fact, the least and most effective architect could never do. But to do it for everyone.
So when you say do it for everyone, are you talking about everyone, the client?
Yes.
Okay.
Everyone, the client.
Now, I know there are plenty of people in our audience right now that, they're going, okay, this maybe business systems make sense, et cetera. But what about the creativity, right? What about the fact that I'm going to design a custom home or a museum, or what about the fact that the design of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago is different than the Museum of Western Art in Carlsbad, California? How do we marry these two things where we've got to have these systems, we've got to build these processes, but somehow at the core is one of the most ultimately creative professions on the planet. So how do you marry those two things up?
Well, that's the great question, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the great question, isn't it? And so suddenly, if we're pursuing that question with the desire to automate that process, with the desire to simplify the complexity of that process in order to actually fulfill that outcome creatively, imaginatively, then that becomes the entrepreneurial dictum. That's why I'm here. That's what Steve Jobs did. That's what great architects of entrepreneurship do. They find out how to make that occur by struggling through it, but with an outcome unlike the traditional architect's outcome. Instead of, in fact, working on that one location in Chicago to design that museum, to design the design of that, to be able to broaden our reach.
Does that mean that we're producing the same thing over and over? Or are we systematizing everything up to and after the design process?
No, we're designing everything. Hear me. When I use the word artificial intelligence, understand it's exactly that. It's intelligence. And it will become exactly what we intended to become. So if effectively we're generalizing, specializing the specialist's knowledge, then that's what we will end up doing. How we're going to do that becomes the driving force of that. But until we decide to do that, we will never do that. In short, until the architect changes his or her mindset, what I'm describing will never be done. But the minute the architect does change his or her mindset, that will then become the new architecture. And hear me, I'm not interested in the old architecture. I'm interested from an entrepreneurial perspective in the new architecture. The new architecture is available to people who don't possess that creative distinction that the specialist possesses so narcissistically. The new architecture becomes available to everyone.
You use the word decide, And I think that's a really important word. One of the things, and I've been dwelling on this because somebody in our audience, is actually Chris Novelli in our audience, brought this up a couple of weeks ago. At the time, he was talking about he started building physical models again. As you can imagine, physical. When I was in school, that's all we had: physical models. We built these models. Now they have computer generated building information modeling. And one thing Chris said has really been dwelling in my head right now. He said, I realize that I get to decide how I run my business. And that really hit me, because I know that there are a lot of people, it's probably not just small firm architects, it's probably a lot of small business owners feel like their customers or clients, whatever they call those people that they're serving, are dictating and deciding what their business is like. But you're talking about being very intentional and deciding what the business is going to be like, aren't you?
Well, yes, understand. Let's go back to the model that I presented earlier. I have a dream, I have a vision, I have a purpose, I have a mission. My dream in this particular case is to transform the state of architecture worldwide. My vision is to invent the McDonald's of architectural development services. My purpose is that every architect, once adopting this new methodology, would literally transform how they do what they do and for whom they do it in ways that we can't even imagine right now. And our mission is to develop the architectural development system through which that evolution would occur. So it all depends upon our dream, our vision, our purpose, and our mission. That states the name of the game. So you got to understand, by determining, by saying, my dream is to transform the state of architectural services worldwide, I'm immediately establishing a position in relationship to this business I'm designing, building, launching, and growing that's completely different than what an architect will typically do. A traditional architect's dream isn't to transform the state of architecture worldwide. Their dream is to lead a life as an architect, doing the work of an architect successfully with the clients they desire to have, to make the living they desire to make, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The two are so light years apart from each other, literally.
That's true.
Light years apart from each other.
You know, when I read in your book about that, the reason people start businesses is to sell them, that was such a foreign concept to me that it took me a while to let that sink in, really, because that had never occurred to me. That's why I would start a business, because I'm an architect, I guess. So,
well, you understand, when I say that, I don't mean to say that that's what everybody does.
Right, but that you could sell it.
Everybody should do,
right?
Because ultimately, they're going to have to do that.
Right. Yeah.
You understand, to sell an architectural firm in which Jerry is the architect is a very unsatisfying experience.
Not a hot commodity.
Yeah. I mean, no. What do you sell? You've got nothing to sell.
Well, and that brings us back to, back to the McDonald's example, right? If you sell a franchise, i.e. McDonald's, you're selling systems, you're selling brand, you're selling everything that's packaged up into how this business operates, what it is, et cetera, which, let's be honest, this is not what most architects are doing. As we apply that to the future, right, to this new architecture of the architecture firm, does that mean that Mark LePage says, sorry, I just saw this comment. Mark says he's getting hungry. We're talking about McDonald's and he's getting hungry. So, all right, I'm off on that tangent all of a sudden. I'll come back to this. But in listening to E-Myth Revisited, you're talking about Sarah, and I think I've gained about 10 pounds listening to the story of Sarah and the pies. Just Just throwing that out there. But so those of you that don't understand that that reference, you're going to have to go by and read E-Myth Revisited to understand that, and then you too can eat pie. But back to the idea of the McDonald's version, I guess, of an architecture firm. There are it comes up over and over in my conversations with architects that they feel like they're being commoditized. You know, there's just expectations from the clients, and we're getting beat down on fees, and you know everything that goes into commoditization. And then we bring up this idea of McDonald's and architecture, and their heads are exploding all of a sudden. Does the idea of systematizing, if that's the word, systemizing, of putting all these processes together, like Ray Kroc and the McDonald's brothers back in the day, does that commoditize architecture or the practice of architecture?
Well, I would resist the word commoditize. Do you understand? Entrepreneurship is not about commoditizing anything.
Right.
Entrepreneurship is about creating something that is highly differentiated in the marketplace. Differentiation is critical to brand. Entrepreneurship is about inventing a brand. A brand is a unique, highly differentiated service, system, business, entity, enterprise on the planet. In a world of all the others who effectively, despite the resistance to the term commoditization, are in fact commoditized, because the average architect isn't Frank Lloyd Wright. The average architect is John Jones.
It's true. It's true.
Struggling to make a living in Podunk, wherever.
Connecticut.
Doing it, and extraordinarily frustrated that he isn't regarded as Frank Lloyd Wright. And when he knows he possesses the ability to become Frank Lloyd Wright, if only other people would recognize him. In short, it's a hopeless task. And so the problem is the commoditization of the profession is simply created by the way the profession is launched, enacted, and commoditized on the planet. How to distinctly differentiate our architect from everyone else is the question. And in the process of doing that, we're going to reinvent architecture from the ground up.
I 100% agree with that.
Reinvent architecture from the ground up. Because I'm not an architect doing that, I'm an entrepreneur doing that. So I'm not identified, I'm not narcissistically identified, I'm not egocentrically identified with my position as an architect. I have nothing to protect. I have nothing to defend. I have nothing to argue about. I'm in a completely new realm, the realm of creating on a blank piece of paper with beginner's mind an outcome that I right now at this very moment haven't a clue how to do. But I do know that if I can literally transform the state of architecture worldwide, I will find a way to make it more democratically available to every human being on the planet. I'm essentially saying that everyone should possess the ability to design their world in a way that illuminates the greatest values inherent in the visual, in the emotional, in the functional, in the financial reality that we get to construct. I'm suggesting to be able to do that for everyone would be absolutely a stunning achievement.
It would be. You mentioned artificial intelligence earlier, and this is something that comes up all the time. I'm sure in other industries and professions as well, but it makes me wonder. Right? Again, you published E-Myth back in the '80s, and the condition of the small business has not changed, but the tools, let's just say the tools have changed, the availability of
Remarkable.
technology and things like that. When you're working with businesses today, um, and again, the basis of a lot of what we're talking about is systems and processes and efficiencies and things like that. Um, w- do you see anything that on the horizon that's just really, really interesting? Maybe it is literally like, AI doing this task and that task, or, it's web based this, cloud that, I don't know. But do you see anything that out there in terms of brand new tools that really excite you as something that small business owners can really leverage?
No. And let me say the reason for that is the greatest single tool in entrepreneurship is the imagination.
Mm, I like
So
that.
understand that the imagination is everything. And it's not the tools one uses, it's the imagination one applies to those tools. And to the degree we don't expand that, the eloquence of that imagination, we simply become a tools based, um, um, deprived, um, community of also rans. So we're not here to do efficiency. We're here to do, beyond effectiveness. And beyond effectiveness means beyond the ordinary in a way that is truly extraordinary, in an artful, extraordinarily, um, um, inspiring, manner. So inspiration is a great and most important word when we think of entrepreneurs. When I liken myself to Steve Jobs, and I look at Steve Jobs and look at his education, you understand he didn't have one. And you understand that everything and anything he created came from Steve Jobs' exquisite imagination.
Mhm.
And it was his exquisite imagination that shaped Apple to become the first $1 trillion enterprise in the world. Think about that. To become the first $1 trillion enterprise, valued enterprise in the world, in the universe. How does a guy do that? And effectively, in the process of doing that, going from the Apple computer to the iPhone, and to understand the leap he took from old code to new code, was devastating to the people who worked there at Apple because they were so possessive of old code that Steve Jobs had to wrench them loose from old code and create new code to replace it.
When you say old co and new co, for those in the audience that have not read the books, can you explain what you mean by that?
Old code is the company you've got. New code is the company you're creating. I'm suggesting in E-Myth terms, we don't go to work on your current practice to fix it. That's a futile, absolutely fatal process. We don't go to work on your practice the way it is to fix it. We rip yourself free of that practice, move you out here down the street, and with a blank piece of paper, begin anew. And that beginning anew follows a path that is effectively brilliant in its simplicity, but absolutely brilliant in what it does in the transformation of the way you think. And that's the eightfold path that I was describing earlier. I have a dream, I have a vision, I have a purpose, I have a mission, I've got a job, which is my client fulfillment system. I've got a practice, which is my client acquisition system, plus my client fulfillment system, which is a three-legged stool: lead generation, lead conversion, client fulfillment. I've got it, which is nothing other than up to 7 turnkey practices. Think of an architectural practice, 7 turnkey architectural practices, plus a turnkey management system. And I've got an enterprise, which is actually 7 turnkey businesses, 49 turnkey practices with a turnkey leadership system. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6, step 7, step 8. A process, the evolution of an enterprise from a company of 1 to a company of 1,000. It's magnificent when you apply yourself to it. But you got to finish step 1 before you do step 2. In short, you've got to determine what your dream is. So if your dream was to transform the state of architecture worldwide, if that's the dream you have, then your vision becomes to invent the McDonald's of architectural services, blah, 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 blah. Well, what in the hell does that mean? Well, it's visually, emotionally, functionally, and financially different than any architectural firm on the planet. Well, how is it different? Well, that's the job, isn't it? To figure that out. In order to realize the dream, I have to realize the vision. And then once having established that, the purpose becomes absolutely clear that every architect on the planet can literally transform how they do what they do by following our methodology. And finally, the architectural development system, the business development system, which makes it all possible.
So let's go back. Let's go back to step 1 and the one-person firm, because we talked earlier about the fact that we have a handful of people in this community right now that have started their own firms in the last 18, 19, 20 months. And I always open the show. We're getting closer to the end of the year, but for the entire year, I've talked about, maybe you've circled a date on the calendar and 2021 is your year and you're going to start your own thing. If for somebody, that one person in the audience right now that is thinking about January 1st or whatever the date is, I'm going to launch my own firm. What is the absolute first thing that they have to do in order to launch January 1st of 2022?
Well, hear me, you're thinking about launching a practice in which
True.
I'm the architect. In short, the very first thing I need to do is to get a client.
Sure.
So what I got to do if I'm going to launch my firm is to get a client. I already know how to do architecture. So I'm not going to have to launch a firm to learn how to do architecture.
Right.
I'm going to go create a job for myself. So the first thing I need to do is to go out in the community and wrestle with other architectural firms to get a client. So the first thing I need to do is to position me as unique. And so the first damn thing every architect will do who starts their own firm is to use social media to tell the story about this architectural firm. They'll go out and go to meetings of the Chamber of Commerce to introduce themselves. They'll network at BNI. They'll do this, they'll do that. They'll associate and disassociate. They'll do all the things that everybody does. Hi, you don't know me, but hi, you don't know me, but hi, you don't know me, but do you know anybody who needs an architect? Do you know anybody who's doing any building? Do you know anybody who, that's it, mix and mix and mix and mix and match. And I saying this, and I know that every single person who's with us right now has done that.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the first thing you got to do if you're going to start the architectural firm the way you're describing it. The way I'm describing it, you wouldn't do any of that.
What would you do?
The way I'm describing it, you'd first of all, with a blank piece of paper in beginner's mind, decide what your business is going to be. In short, you're going to design your company. And you're going to design your company not as a company of one, but a company of many. Because a company of one isn't a company at all. It's simply self-employment. I'm suggesting something else is at hand. And so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to discover your dream. Well, what does that mean? Well, what do I really want to do when I grow up? What do I really want to do if I were to leave a legacy? If I could even imagine leaving a legacy, what would that legacy be? What drives me? What desire do I have for changing the world, changing the way the world works, fixing the way the world, and on and on and on and on. A dream. So I'd enter the dreaming room. That's the very first thing every architect on the planet should do. They should enter the dreaming room to discover their dream, their vision, their purpose, and their mission. And in the process, understand something absolutely extraordinary is going to occur. And it's going to be outrageous in this respect. It's going to rip apart who they think they are and open the door to who they may become. And so the first thing that has to be let go of is the past. The very first thing that has to be let go of in this evolutionary process is the past and the present. It's who I've become by my training, by my dedication, by my interest, by my et cetera and so forth, and put all of it in question. So the very first thing that has to happen is to put everything in question. You got that? That's disruptive at the highest order. And it creates chaos in the stereotypical mind. That's our objective at the beginning. My objective at the beginning is to piss everybody off. And I really do that well. So my objective is to piss everybody off because I'm threatening them by putting into question who they are and what they do and why they do it and what the value of that really is.
I think that's what we need. I think we need that disruption.
Work at the heart of it. Because entrepreneurs are inventing a new world.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're trying to be mindful of time as well. You mentioned go into the dreaming room. You got the blank piece of paper with the beginner's mind. I know you're opening a new session of your dreaming room. Can you tell us a little bit about what your dreaming room is?
Well, sure. I sit there with a handful of people, with 100 people, with 1,000 people. And I walk them through the process of a dream, a vision, a purpose, and a mission. And in the process, they respond. And we do this now. I've done this 63 times live on the street, meaning that a 3-day event. I've altered that 3-day event now to a 4-week event, 90 minutes each week. And so we enter into that 90-minute session each week for 4 consecutive weeks to discover your dream, your vision, your purpose, and your mission. But effectively, what we're really there to discover is the dissatisfaction that effectively lives with you right now. And that dissatisfaction comes in to the question one of your folks asks, well, what's wrong with self-employment? And what's wrong with self-employment is it's a stupid killer of our lives and our time. Because self-employment doesn't work. It's failed consistently over and over and over and over again, that fully 90% of self-employed, in quotes, business owners will have failed in business by the time they would have reached their 10th anniversary. So it don't work. It don't work. And it's a horrible, horrible experience to go through and to hold on to, hoping that you're going to find a way to make it work, because the business model isn't a business at all. It's simply self-employment. And you're reporting to a jerk. So you're reporting to an idiot who has absolutely no understanding or interest in the business of it, but simply the work of it. You follow me? The work of it. I want to become Frank Lloyd Wright. I want to become Frank Lloyd Wright. I want to be known for who I am and what I do. I want to be known for my talent. And every architect on the planet knows how impossible a task that is.
So when you talk about the dreamy room, and you mentioned this earlier as well, building a company of one to a company of 1,000, does everybody need to aspire to have 1,000 employees?
No, not at all. Not at all. But everyone has to aspire to build a turnkey methodology through which they're able to transform the state of architecture worldwide. I'm suggesting, to the degree you're not passionately interested in that, you're consigning yourself to doing it every single day. And the only creativity that's evolved is in the particular assignment you've got right now on this particular building, this particular house, this particular garage, this particular whatever project you're working on. And it's almost always hugely disappointed because your client isn't as creative as you are. And so you're suddenly constantly being dispirited by the fact that your true creativity isn't being honored to the degree you wished it were. So you're constantly frustrated by the fact that you're not working on these higher, the art center in Chicago, the whatever. What you understand? Major outcome. The Taj Mahal, for God's sakes, of whatever. You're not working on that. You're working on Minnie and Murray's garage, and you're saying, "Oh
you
God.
couldn't be more right. I can't even believe it. That's it. I don't have to know anything else from that. You really nailed it.
This is what I went to school for. This is what I've spent all these years for. This is what I spent all this time for. Minnie and Murray's garage.
Right. Exactly. Wow.
I think that's my neighbors.
Minnie and Murray. Well, yep. You pretty much summed that up pretty well.
So you got it. You understand that the essence of innovation, the essence of creativity. I like to say, and I'm given to say because I believe this implicitly, we're born in the image of God. At least that's what Torah says. We're born in the image of God. And if we're born in the image of God, then we're born to create. And if we're born to create in the image of God, we're born to create a world fit for God. Well, how in the world am I to achieve that result? The entrepreneurial core of creativity and imagination is truly here to reinvent the world. I'm suggesting that creator within every architect on the planet could be better spent recreating the world of architecture to a degree that it in fact has reach far beyond any architectural reality today, far beyond the ordinary architectural process, doing it, busy. There's greater work to be done by all of us.
That's gonna be my new mantra. It's gonna be my new mantra. Doing it. Busy. I'm gonna say
you don't
that.
Want that to be your mantra.
No, I don't. But then I'll have to remind myself that's what I'm up to.
Yeah.
Think of something better.
I saw a comment from Isra Banks a few minutes ago. She said she's so inspired, and I agree. When you're talking about the dreaming room, for those that are in our audience right now that are inspired by what you're saying and thinking about a new architecture for the profession of architecture, I'm going to put on the screen right now a URL, if I could find it. There it is. If you want to know more about what Michael's talking about when he's talking about the dreaming room, go to thenewdreamingroom.com. thenewdreamingroom.com. That's what 1, 2, 4 words smashed together like one. And I believe when I looked earlier today that the next session starts in about 19 or 20 days or so, something like that.
Is it,
something like that.
Is it at that nice hotel that you describe in your book? Because I would definitely go if it were at that hotel. The one that you mentioned before,
Yes.
is it there? Is that where it happens?
Yes. Yeah, it is. I'd suggest also this book. Let me hold it up.
There you go.
Awakening the Entrepreneur Within would be
Hmm.
an immensely important book for all of you to read. How ordinary people can create extraordinary companies. And at the heart of this book is the dream, the vision, the purpose, and the mission. And then it gives an example of the application of that in, I think it's chapter 21 in this book. Let me see. Oh, pardon me. I'll find it. Yeah. Chapter 21 in this book is the wisdom of process. And in that chapter, I talk about a fictitious business. I create a fictitious business in the book. And the business is called Who is Manny Espinosa? A white paper for a business revolution. And you read that story and go through it about Manny Espinosa, an industry hungry for new solutions, solving the employee attrition problem. Who is Manny Espinosa? The solution, the model, and so forth and so on, and how one would transform a condition that exists, for example, in the companies such as McDonald's, in which they have 100% employee turnover every year. I want you to imagine what I just said, that 100% turnover every year.
That's hard to imagine.
But understand how devastating the obvious problem that is. How to address that problem. In this book, I talk about that. But I talk about that in the context. I have a dream, I have a vision, I have a purpose, I have a mission. So the real work is that work, the work of an entrepreneur, not the work of an architect. The work of an entrepreneur, not the work of an architect. Steve Jobs never went to school to learn a trade. Steve Jobs never went to school to learn a profession. Steve Jobs went to work to enhance his imagination, to expand his reach exponentially in all arenas throughout the world with no limits whatsoever on where he would apply his intelligence, his imagination, his creativity. You can do that. I'm saying that every single one of us can do that. And the work we do is designed to enable, facilitate, inspire you to pursue that with everything you've got.
That's very inspiring, Michael. Thank you for that message and for the wisdom that you've shared with us for this hour. I know you have to jump off right into something else right now, so we really appreciate you joining us and for all of the books that you have out there. And I encourage everybody to check out the newdreamingroom.com, as well as I saw Mark posted the Amazon link to the book that Michael was just referencing. So check those out. And again, Michael, thank you very much for
Thank you,
everything that
folks.
you do. Really enjoyed the conversation today.
Been delightful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And
And
we're
for
getting
those of you,
very, very, very strong positive feedback from your audience. And I truly appreciate that. So
thank you.
Jeremy, I know you, I respect you, I regard you with the highest passion for the possibilities within each of you. And I'm suggesting the path for that is different than the path that you're on right now. And that path is the discovery that goes forward when you enter the dreaming room to discover a dream, a vision, a purpose, and a mission. Not the dream I explicated, but the dream you'll discover within you to pursue. Gotta go.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for spending this time with us here today. And everybody in our audience, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I say this every week, but I appreciate you. Without you, we would not be talking to Michael Gerber today. So, for everybody out there, please take care of yourselves. Be well, be safe. Keep those around you safe and well. Find a way to breathe tonight and relax a little bit and rejuvenate, because we're going to do this all over again tomorrow. So again, thanks everybody.
Let me add one last little ingredient. Should they like to connect with me, they can reach me at michael@michaelegerber.com.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Reach out to Michael.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Bye.
thanks, Michael. And everybody else that's out there, again, thank you. I hope that I'll see you somewhere sometime soon. Katharine and I are going to bounce right now and go to the backstage. And if you're not familiar with what that is, every day, every week after we wrap up the recording or the broadcast, simulcast of Context and Clarity Live, we go backstage with a couple of guests and we talk about our biggest takeaways, lessons that we learned, and things that we think we can apply in our own businesses. So we're going to bounce right now and go back there to the backstage and record that episode. And you can look for it wherever you listen to podcasts coming up here in the near future. I'm not exactly sure what the schedule for publishing that is because of the holiday, and a little bit of pivot we're going to talk about in the near future about the format of that podcast. It's kind of exciting. So stay tuned for when the backstage episode will come out. But with that, I do want to give you a heads up because next week on Context and Clarity Live, we will have Jennifer Castenson will be our featured guest next Thursday afternoon. She formerly was the head of programming at Zonda, which was formerly Hanley Wood. Now she is the vice president of innovation at an Australian build tech company. So we're going to talk to Jennifer about innovation and innovating practices. I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. So check that out next Thursday. And of course, as always, we'll be back in the Entree Architect Community Facebook group tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern. And our topic tomorrow will be what are the advantages and or disadvantages to running a business versus having a job, or maybe self-employment. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll kick that off on Clubhouse at 9 a.m. Eastern and be inside the Facebook group at 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow afternoon. So with that, again, thanks everybody. Appreciate all of you. Thank you, Katharine, for keeping the wheels on the bus.
Well, that was
and,
something.
And hope that we see you all somewhere sometime soon. Thanks, everybody.